Arguably, United's greatest era came in the 1950s with the Busby Babes, the youthful side that were in the process of sweeping all before them, both home and abroad, until tragedy ended it all too soon. At the centre of that was Matt Busby, the enigmatic manager of the club whose mild demeanour and iron will pushed the club towards glory. But there was power behind the throne, a modest Welshman who lived and breathed Manchester United Football Club but didn't seek the limelight, fame or even recognition. He just wanted to mould out of the young lads in his care the great players the club deserved, and he did his job very well, as we got Duncan Edwards, Bobby Charlton, Dennis Viollet and George Best, just to name a few. So here's to you, Jimmy Murphy. James Patrick Murphy was born in Tom Pentre, Glamorgan on the 8th of August 1910. He played football for the local team at all levels before being called up to the Welsh youth side to play England in Cardiff in 1924. 4 years later, at the age of 17, he was signed by West Brom, where for the next decade as a wing half, he featured in over 200 games, but remarkably never got on the score sheet. In his second season at the club, still unestablished, Murphy failed to make the victorious Baggies Cup final side in 1931 against local rivals Birmingham, but was on the losing side 4 years later when two late Sheffield Wednesday goals did for the lads from the Black Country. It was going to get worse as Jimmy and West Brom were relegated in 1938. In the summer of 1939 he moved on to Swindon, but only played 4 matches for them before the outbreak of World War II put an end to his playing career. Still, that was not before he'd collected 15 senior Welsh caps. As for his personal life, Jimmy had got married in 1935, having 6 children with his wife Winifred Powell over the next 14 years. During the war, Jimmy rose to the rank of sergeant and became a very passionate army drill instructor. Whilst Jimmy Murphy and the recently installed Manchester United manager Matt Busby had faced each other on the pitch, where the latter had played for Man City and Liverpool during their playing days, it was actually a chance meeting in Italy towards the end of the conflict that changed their lives and Manchester United forever. Jimmy was stationed in Bari, Italy, giving an impassioned lecture on football to the men, but he delivered it with such gusto it impressed Busby greatly. He told Murphy that if he wanted it, he had a job once he was demobbed. Murphy joined the coaching staff as head coach in 1946, a position he would hold for the next quarter of a century. Before the war, the new chairman, J.W. Gibson, was concerned with the big fees spent on players who didn't quite make the grade. He wanted an emphasis on youth, that United should bring in its own players, and through club secretary Walter Crickmere, the club became very strong in this aspect and had ready to play a very solid first team in youth setup when Busby took up the reins. Jimmy had a few major responsibilities, obviously the coaching of the players, ensuring fitness and improving them, but also scouting with a nationwide network of United scouts at his disposal, targeting young players of school leaving age. He would then mould them into the finished product. He felt as if the youth players were his family, and he referred to them collectively as his orchard, where he grew them into his golden apples, which when ripe, he'd move them on to Busby. The Welshman would watch them with an eagle eye in training sessions and youth matches. When there was a pass misplaced or the ball wasn't released at the right time, afterwards he would give one-to-one attention to the young offender and dress him down, explain clearly why there was a mistake and how he could lose the team the game in the future. Bobby Charlton himself, with this kind of forceful advice, said that no one improved his game like Jimmy Murphy. The two-man team of Busby and Murphy started to turn United, who were a yo-yo club pre-war, into a formidable outfit. The Red Devils were runners-up 4 times before taking the league title in 51-52, with a mixture of youth and experience, and almost all of it homegrown. However, that title, the first in over 40 years, wasn't the first piece of success United enjoyed. The FA Cup was won in 48 with an epic 4-2 victory over Stanley Matthews' Blackpool at Wembley. In the 1952-53 season, the FA inaugurated the FA Youth Cup tournament. Jimmy Murphy's youngsters swept the competition for the first 5 years, ominously first failing to win it in 1958. After the third win in the competition in 56, Jimmy was promoted to assistant manager at United, although he was pretty much holding that position already and was working all hours for the good of the club. Despite seemingly United consuming all of his time, in 1956 he made a decision, indirectly, that would ultimately save his life 2 years down the line. He became manager of Wales, the only outside job offer he didn't turn down as his reputation grew. After the league title in 1952, Busby decided to take more and more risks with incorporating the youth side into the first team. Established household names were moved on, as the likes of Duncan Edwards, David Pegg, Dennis Viollet, Bobby Charlton, Eddie Coleman and so on were promoted. As a testament to Jimmy Murphy's work, only twice in the 5 years from that third FA Youth Cup win in 1953 did the club buy talent. It did take a few years for who the media started to call the Busby Babes to really gel. Individually they had the talent but were still a little rough. They had to click as a team, so they didn't win anything before regaining the league title with their youthful looking side in 55-56. After winning that championship by 11 points from Blackpool, Busby believed that the side could be greater still and defied the Football League, who had banned Chelsea from entering the European Cup the year before, by competing in the tournament regardless. In the first European match at Old Trafford, Anderlecht Belgium were swept aside mercilessly 10-0. It's a club record that still stands to this day. The lads made it all the way to the semi-finals, where they faced the indomitable Real Madrid. Still green in Europe, the Red Devils went down 3-1 in the Spanish capital and were losing at home until a draw was salvaged. The Spaniards went on to win the competition that year. Nevertheless, Busby and Murphy's boys took back-to-back league titles, winning the league in 56-57 and also making the cup final, aiming to become the first side in the 20th century to win the league and cup double. Up against Aston Villa, their striker Peter McParland cynically charged and clashed heads with United keeper Ray Wood early on, breaking his cheekbone. Unable to continue between the sticks, another graduate from Jimmy's youth academy, Jackie Blanchflower, kept goal, and Wood came back onto the pitch with concussion to try and help out. It was to no avail, but Parlin was rewarded for his gamesmanship, scoring a brace, and even Tommy Taylor's late header couldn't change the outcome, the boys going down 2-1. United were up for 3 trophies again in the 57-58 season, and after a poor start to the campaign, found themselves 6 points behind leaders Wolves, with 14 games still to play on the 4th of February 1958. The Red Devils were also in the 5th round of the Cup, due to play Sheffield Wednesday. Meanwhile in Europe, United had advanced to the quarter-finals against Red Star Belgrade and took a 2-1 lead to the Yugoslav capital for their match on the 5th of February. In Belgrade, they went 3-up quite comfortably, then the boys took the foot off the gas in the second half and eventually drew the match 3-3, meaning that they would proceed to meet the Italian giants AC Milan in the semi-finals. Jimmy couldn't make the trip. His Welsh side were playing Israel in a World Cup qualifier in Cardiff on the same day, and so, in his stead, former United player and Jimmy's good friend and highly regarded coach at the club, Bert Whalley, took his place. In this second season of defying the Football League, as well as the issues the side had had coming back from Bilbao in Spain the year before, when snow and ice on the wings had almost meant the flight was cancelled, the club decided to charter its own plane back from Belgrade. The Football League had threatened United with fines if they failed to meet league commitments. No quarter was given, so United felt pushed to come back on time. On the way back, British European Airways Flight 609 refueled at Munich Airport. When the plane was ready, the snow was really coming down, and they tried to take off twice without success. After returning the passengers to the terminal, the captain decided to go for it again. The plane then skidded on the slush that had built up on the runway over that time, which meant it couldn't reach its takeoff velocity, and it crashed into some houses at the end of the runway. 7 of United's babes died instantly. Captain Roger Byrne, Mark Jones, Eddie Coleman, Tommy Taylor, David Pegg, Liam Whelan and Jeff Bent. Jimmy's friend and stand-in Bert Whalley also perished, and with club secretary Walter Crittmere and trainer Tom Curry. Also, other passengers, including journalists, out there for the game were killed. Jimmy had no idea about this tragedy as he returned home from winning Wales's World Cup qualifier, which would see them into the 58 finals in Sweden. Getting to Old Trafford, one of his secretaries, Alma George, told him of the news. Jimmy was in shock. He didn't quite take it in, but when she started to cry, he realised what had happened and cried himself in his office for 20 minutes. For the next 12 hours, nursing a bottle of whiskey in an almost catatonic state, digesting what had happened and waiting for more news, Jimmy Murphy had to dig deep to carry on. There was no one to confide in, no one to help. He didn't know what to expect. He was given a list of those confirmed as having died and who were seriously injured, including Busby and star player Duncan Edwards. He got a flight the next morning with the victims' families. Jimmy went to see Duncan first of all, who was in a daze, suffering from extensive injuries. In a low voice he asked Jimmy, "What time is kick-off tomorrow?" The Colossus then lost consciousness. Jimmy wept. He then visited the rest of the players who'd survived: Bobby Charlton, Jackie Blanchflower, Johnny Berry, Kenny Morgans, Bill Fulks, Harry Gregg, Albert Scanlon, Dennis Violet, Ray Wood. It was heartbreaking. He then visited the boss, Matt Busby, in an oxygen tent, fighting for his life and barely conscious. Jimmy lifted up the plastic sheeting, and after a very brief exchange, Matt Busby said in a low voice, "Keep the flag flying, Jimmy. Keep things going until I get back." With the boss incapacitated, his dear friend Bert Whalley killed, it took all of his strength to fulfil Busby's wish. Meanwhile, the United board was in turmoil, even considering closing the club down. Jimmy insisted that they didn't, that they must carry on for the ones they lost and the ones still fighting for life. United fans from that day to this owe Jimmy Murphy a massive service. If it weren't for him, goodness knows what would have become of our beloved club. On the 19th of February, Jimmy pulled in youth and reserve players along with 2 Munich survivors, Harry Gregg and Bill Fulks, to play the 5th round cup tie against Sheffield Wednesday, the first game back since the tragedy. United won 3-0 in a rousing Old Trafford atmosphere. However, the euphoria was muted for Jimmy, and it got worse 2 days later as a call in the early hours, 15 days after the crash, he was informed that Duncan Edwards' injuries had done something that most of his opponents couldn't do and had got the better of him. He was 21. Unbelievably, Jimmy Murphy pushed the team on, and whilst we fell apart understandably in the league, we came through after replays in the Cup, which was helped by the return of Bobby Charlton and Dennis Violet, now recovered physically from their injuries if not mentally. Not to be returning were Ulsterman and half-back Jackie Blanchflower and mercurial winger Johnny Berry, both of whom had survived their injuries but were too severe to resume their careers. United faced Bolton in that year's Cup final. Matt Busby, now recovered, had returned to England but was not fit enough yet to resume his duties, so Jimmy deservedly led the side out at Wembley. It was a tough, emotional day. The country and the neutrals were behind United, but the Welshman's patched-up side were no match for Nat Lofthouse Bolton, the England legend scoring a brace, including for the second year running, one that clattered the keeper and hero of the disaster, Harry Gregg. It was that incident that finally brought in rules to protect keepers from being barged. After the final, and after the work that still had to be done at Old Trafford, Murphy then took charge of the Welsh team, who were, thanks to him, in their first World Cup finals. Wales were drawn in a group with host Sweden, Mexico and Hungary. After 3 drawn games and without the goal difference rule to separate them, much to Wales's luck, having an inferior difference by 3 goals, they had to play a playoff against the Hungarians. Wales recording an impressive 2-1 win, which was enough to get them to the quarter-finals against Brazil. It was a lone goal, and the first in the World Cup finals by Pelé, that saw Murphy's side go out 1-0. Considering Brazil then destroyed France in the semis and Sweden in the final, both by 5-2 scorelines, that wasn't a particularly terrible result. Jimmy would hold his position as Welsh boss until 1964. Jimmy's reputation was rising, and in the summer of '58 Arsenal approached him to become full-time manager. In loyalty to United he declined. He would in time also turn down approaches from, amongst others, the Brazilian national football team and Juventus. He was a United man, all or nothing. In his first campaign after Munich, 58-59, United remarkably came runners-up after a poor start to the season, but in the following years the side struggled. That was until 1963, when not only did the boys take home the cup in a 3-1 win over favourites Leicester, but in the summer George Best graduated from Murphy's player Orchard. United got better and better after that, taking 2 league titles in 64-65 and 66-67, but to Busby the European Cup was the Holy Grail. United went out to Partizan Belgrade in the 65-66 competition at the semi-final stage, but the boys took it one step further 2 years later as they incredibly bypassed Real Madrid in the semi-finals 4-3 on aggregate, including a memorable 3-3 draw at the Bernabeu. The Wembley final, though, was a tough and at times very physical affair against former 2-time champions Benfica. 1-1 at full time with Bobby Charlton's opener having been equalised. Matt Busby and Jimmy Murphy roused their players for one last effort to bring the trophy back to Manchester and England for the first time. It did the trick, United scoring 3 times through George Best, Brian Kidd and Bobby Charlton in the first period of extra time, essentially killing the tie. After the European Cup win, Jimmy Murphy and now Sir Matt Busby had another season and then retired. It was time. Jimmy continued to scout for the club into the late 70s, whilst Matt became general manager and received the souvenir shop. Jimmy, unlike Sir Matt, never went looking for money and was treated shabbily as he stepped down the hierarchy. The Welshman had never driven, and the club had paid for his taxi and also his phone bill, because that's how he'd done his club business. United immediately took those benefits away, and this man, who saved the club and kept things together after Munich, had to start getting the bus again. While still part-time scout for the club, this hero of Manchester United dies suddenly from a birthday aorta on the 14th of November 1989, aged 79. The great man was honoured in several ways after his passing. Manchester United initiated the Jimmy Murphy Young Player of the Year award. Also in March 2009, in his former family home in the Welsh town where he grew up, he was given a blue plaque. The youth part of United's training ground at Carrington is named after Jimmy Murphy. And finally, after a long campaign by several groups who nobly preserve our club's history and legacy, including his family, Manchester United Football Club have commissioned a statue to be erected of Jimmy Murphy outside the Stretford End at Old Trafford, the least he deserves. So that was the contribution of one of the greatest figures to walk through the doors at Manchester United Football Club. Someone who selflessly committed all of his time to the club and even managed to lead Wales to their only World Cup finals. So what do you think of the man, and did I perhaps miss something? Please comment below and like, share and subscribe. Thank you as always for your support.